When Eldarien opens his eyes again, the fog of shadows is gone, and the cavern in which he finds himself is clear, with a high sloping roof visible 20 or 25 feet overhead, and light streaming in from the passage to his left, the passage that he had taken down from the ravine into the lair of the Eoten. Aching from his fall and from the stress of the fear-filled time before his collapse, he pushes himself to his feet and picks up his greatsword. To his surprise, the blade is completely free of blood or stain, as if the light that had burned through the sword had cleansed the blood along with the purging of the beast. After returning the clean sword back to its scabbard, Eldarien kneels down over Rorlain, who still lies unconscious, and prepares to lift him onto his back. But as he begins to do so, Rorlain groans and opens his eyes. After looking around for a few moments with confusion blurring his gaze, the shadow passes, and his eyes focus upon Eldarien's face.
I'm...
He sighs.
Yes, you are safe.
Eldarien whispers.
We must get out of here.
Rorlain begins, his voice tense with fear.
There is a terrible beast in this cave. He carried me here himself.
I know, but it is gone now. Do not fear.
Gone? How?
It has been expelled,
Eldarien says.
We can speak more of it later, but your father is worried about you, and I am sure that the sooner we return, the better.
You come from my father?
Aye.
Well then, let us make haste.
Rorlain rises to his feet, but his legs falter beneath him, and he would fall, except that Eldarien catches him under the arms and holds him up.
We will make what haste we can,
Eldarien says.
According to your capacity. But it is better that you recover and we are delayed than that you push yourself too hard.
You do not think the creature will return?
Rorlain asks, steadying himself and testing his legs again, which this time hold strong.
No, I do not. Many there are of its kind, but that one has been cast far away, if not dispelled entirely from existence.
Still, I would feel better if we were at least out of this dungeon before trying to take further rest.
Eldarien laughs softly at this and says in reply,
Yes, I would as well.
With these few words, the two men make their way out of the ravine and back into the light of day, which has now proceeded near to evening, as the sun shines over the mountains in the west and casts long shadows across the flatlands around them.
Come, let us sit a while,
Eldarien says, and gestures to a large flat stone not far from the entrance to the ravine.
I can walk now,
Rorlain replies.
Should we not hurry back before darkness falls?
But you were wounded, were you not?
Asks Eldarien.
Does the wound need dressing?
Ah, I had hardly noticed.
Rorlain sighs, looking down at his torn shirt stained with blood.
It is really nothing. As surprising as it is to me now, I have come away unharmed. These wounds come from the claws of the beast that pierced me when it carried me from the edge of the wood to its lair. They are little more than cuts from a thorn would be.
Nonetheless, let us have a quick look. I am concerned that wounds inflicted by such a creature could be anything but simple.
Really, I am all right.
Rorlain says, slight frustration in his voice, but immediately he subdues himself, nods, and sits on the stone. He unbuttons what remains of the front of his shirt and pulls it open to expose his chest, which indeed shows a crooked line of puncture marks inflicted by a giant hand, with nails like claws. Eldarien sits down beside him and inspects the wound.
You act as if you are accustomed to giving orders.
Rorlain says absent-mindedly, looking at his chest as well, all frustration now gone from his voice.
Or at least you are accustomed to caring for the well-being of others.
That is true on both accounts.
Eldarien confirms and presses lightly against one of the marks.
Does this hurt?
Only slightly.
There is no pus and very little blood, and I see no signs of swelling or infection. You may indeed have nothing but simple wounds. What a blessing that is indeed.
Indeed.
Rorlain says, and runs his finger over one of the wounds himself.
I thought I would never again wake.
He adds, emotion in his voice.
And here I am with hardly more than scratches. I don't know how I shall ever express my gratitude to you or repay you for what you have done."
"Neither of those is needed,"
Eldarien replies.
"And anyway, I would be more averse to having you in debt to me than being indebted to you myself."
"As you say."
R'hllane says, raising his head and looking into Eldarien's eyes. His own gaze is serious and mature, thoughtful, and full of both pain and longing, an intensity which Eldarien, to his own shame, had not expected to see there.
"But a blood bond is a blood bond, and shall not be broken."
R'hllane continues, his voice soft, as he begins to button his shirt again.
"No matter what you say, I owe you my life, and my people say that such a bond is one of the most sacred and is unable to be dissolved by anything in this world."
"Well then, R'hllane,"
Eldarien answers,
"let your troth be one of gratitude, and may you pray to the gods for me, for that is what I need more than aught else."
The man says nothing in response, but simply stands, looks out over the land to the east, and sighs. Eldarien stands and looks with him, and then says,
"Let us return to your father and to your home."
"Right now there is nothing I wish for more."
They step into the clearing around the homestead well after dark, with the stars burning vivid overhead and the nocturnal sounds of the forest singing in their ears. R'hllane knocks on the door of the house. Eldarien supposes because he doesn't want to walk straight in and surprise his father, and they both wait. When the door opens, Eldarien takes a step back and allows the emotional reunion between father and son to take place. He lowers his eyes and waits, and is startled when he feels a firm hand on his shoulder. Raising his gaze, he sees Rodrik looking upon him with tears in his eyes.
"You have done what I did not think possible. I had little hope that my son would return home safely, and yet here he is, and it is all thanks to you."
Eldarien nods and thinks to himself,
"One life saved for the many that I have unjustly taken."
Come in, come in."
Rodrik urges with a wave of his hand. In the house they speak little, as Rodrik senses the exhaustion of the two men, though he sets before them a little food and drink. After they have eaten, they retire for the night, lulled to sleep by the sound of a light rain that blows in shortly after they lay down, making soft music against the roof and the window panes. In the morning, Eldarien again wakes early, despite the events of the previous day. The others are still sleeping when he rises from the sleeping pallet made for him on the floor. The air is cold in the house, since the hearth has died down to ash, with only a few glowing embers remaining. The rain has ceased, and now a deep stillness envelops the house, punctuated only by the breathing of the two sleeping men. Pulling on his boots and his cloak, Eldarien softly opens the door and steps outside. It is still dark before even the first streaks of dawn in the sky, but the moon is a large crescent descending towards the horizon and illuminating the night, such that the silhouettes of trees are clearly visible, black shapes etched against the dim light of the sky, many fingered hands, as it were, reaching up in and among the stars. Eldarien takes a few steps out into the clearing and looks into the dark waters of the spring, in which the twinkling of the stars is reflected.
"It is like my own heart,"
he thinks, deep feelings stirring unbidden within him.
"A murky surface whose depths cannot be seen."
Then the voice of goodness he had heard while in the Eoten's cavern returns to him, and he feels again the surge of peace that he had felt during that moment. But as he thinks of the words spoken to him, fear also stirs within him.
What does it mean? Lightborn. A scourge of dark and servant of light. I suppose I was just in the right place at the right time, and the goddess made good on my presence.
He turns his gaze upwards. and drinks in the expanse of the night sky with his eyes and his heart, the serenity of the celestial firmament contrasting with the turmoil in his own heart. He allows his eyes to scan the sky, passing from star to star, constellation to constellation, until his eyes rest on the sign of Hyliana.
But then again,
He thinks,
the way that she spoke to me, it is not as if she was using me, nor as if I were some anonymous tool, chosen at random or through the interplay of circumstances. But still, if I am anything, I am a man of darkness, covered in shadow inside and out, with only a speck of light left alive somewhere deep inside me.
and his mind carries him back now to the barrow of Galaptes once again, the Galaptes of his past, which is also his destination in the present.
In that moment, too, I was spoken to, chosen.
Absent-mindedly, he raises his hand and reaches into his shirt, placing his fingers upon the amulet that he had taken then, so many years ago, and has kept with him ever since.
But then, too, it was a matter of circumstances, the interplay of events that led me to be in that forgotten place, unvisited by living men, at that time and in that way. I don't understand, and I don't know how to move forward, if moving forward is even what I desire. Life when my hometown is destroyed, an amulet of an ancient king, escape from shipwreck, a blessed sword, and the darkness crumbling before me as if nothing. Does my answer come so quickly, after I've only just begun my journey? I set forth from Igni to find some light concerning the events of our anguished time, and some path through the darkness by which I may help. And already it's like an answer has come to meet me. But no, it is not an answer, but only more questions.
When the first rays of dawn begin to filter through the trees in the east, causing them to glow like black sentinels bathed in a dim light, Eldarien turns back and enters the house. Roderick is awake and stoking the now blazing fire in the hearth, while Rorlane still sleeps. The former looks up as Eldarien enters and smiles.
"You don't sleep much, do you?"
He asks.
I suppose not.
A long-term problem?
An acquired habit.
Roderick leaves it at that, as if now that this stranger has saved his son's life, no further questions remain concerning his past or his purpose. Eldarien sits down beside Roderick and says,
Your son was lightly wounded when the beast took him, but it was an incidental wound, as it were, minor and unintentional.
So there was a beast after all?
It was as you feared, but the trouble should be past now.
Roderick looks at Eldarien with raised eyebrow for a moment, and then turns back to the fire, the orange light of the flames glistening in his thoughtful eyes.
If the wound was minor, why do you tell me about it?
In case of infection or consequence,
Eldarien replies.
I have never encountered a creature the likes of which I saw yesterday, and I know not what result comes of its claws piercing human flesh.
Should I be worried?
Cautious, perhaps, but not worried. We inspected it yesterday. A series of puncture marks on his chest, and there was nothing unsettling. They indeed looked simple and clean.
I see.
Roderick breathes, as if pondering Eldarien's words, and then looking up again asks,
Do you think this will change the behavior of the creatures of the forest?
I really do not know. It may be related or it may not. Only time will tell, I suppose.
If you had to give an opinion, what would you say that you expect?
Eldarien thinks about the question for a moment, and then answers,
I do not expect anything to change, or very little. But there is much I don't know, so I wouldn't take any prediction of mine with undue gravity.
Thank you for your thoughts anyway.
Of course.
Eldarien says, and then asks a question of his own.
Do you know anything of the creatures that people have taken to calling Druidach?
I thought you would know far more than I do,
replies Roderick.
I'd still like to hear your part, if you have anything that you think fit to say.
I really don't, since there are no villages nearby, and I haven't travelled in years. Rorlane goes to either Igni or Erasia when we need anything from town, but even that is rarely.
I understand.
Eldarien says.
Do you think that these creatures, be they truth or fable, are connected with the strange behavior of the wildlife and with the beast that took Rorlane?
I have my suspicions. Maybe indeed what people have come to calling Druadag is really nothing else than what I myself encountered. Perhaps they are one and the same.
You really think that might be the case?
Asks Roderick.
Did the beast you encounter appear in the shape of a man, as though risen from the grave, a walking corpse?
Is that what people say the Druadag look like?
To this, Roderick laughs and then says,
Well, I suppose perhaps I do know more than you.
I think you do.
Eldarien agrees with a smile.
But yes,
Continues Roderick.
that is the word which Rorlane picked up on his last visit to Erasia. He told me that he heard these creatures come in during the night and slaughter livestock and rip up the crop from the fields before it is even full grown. I suppose they eat whatever they can and don't find enough wherever they happen to make their abode.
I find it suspicious that they would need to eat at all.
Eldarien observes. Roderick laughs again.
Yes, that thought didn't even cross my mind. If they really are dead creatures, or God's forbid men, brought back to life, then surely they wouldn't need ordinary sustenance.
As far as I understand it, the art of necromancy cannot bring the dead back to life.
Explains Eldarien.
It can only create a channel of communication between the living and the spirits that have passed on, and a tenuous channel at that.
An art abhorrent to the gods, if all the accounts are true?
Roderick adds.
Indeed. But if necromancy lies at the root of what is happening with these Druadag, whatever they might be, then I fear a great evil is at work twisting the intentions of the Seven, turning the cycle of life and death on its head.
Only ill fruit would such actions bear.
Muses Roderick, scratching his chin.
Particularly if those who are dead but now live are now bringing to death those who still live.
It is an unsettling thought.
Eldarien sighs, looking into the flames that leap in the hearth and musing on the interplay of life and death, of danger and security that marks the world in its present state. Fire, a source of warmth, a symbol of the security of the home, can also become a destructive force if turned away from its proper balance. So too water, source of life and growth and health, can kill. He knows both of these things firsthand, the razing of his village through fire and the loss of many whom he knew through water. And in both he came face to face with the nearness of his own death. But nonetheless, he still loves both and sees their beauty, fire and water.
Are you all right?
Roderick's voice stirs him out of his reverie.
Ah, yes, I am.
Eldarien replies.
I was just thinking. I do hope that we are dealing here with nothing more than natural creatures that have grown beyond their bounds or become hungry for the bounty that human civilization can provide, and only through human fear and imagination have been dreamed up as the living dead.
Is that a possibility?
It seems to me quite likely at this point,
Eldarien says.
But that is why I intend to discover more. I would like to stop guessing and come to some kind of certainty that I may act.
I would like to go with you.
The voice startles both of the men sitting by the fire, for it is the voice of Rorlane.
What did you say, son?
Roderick asks.
I said that if this man intends to discover more of the terrors of which you speak, I wish to accompany him.
Rorlane steps from the darkness into the firelight.
Forgive me for eavesdropping, but I woke a while ago and heard your conversation.
There is nothing to forgive,
Eldarien says.
Come, sit down.
Rorlane sits cross-legged on the floor beside his father, and the two men remain in silence for a few moments. Roderick is the first to speak.
Do you really think that is wise, Rorlane?
Why would it not be?
He replies.
This man here, Eldarien, Eldarien saved my life from a creature the likes of which I could never have imagined. Now I know that terrors exist in this world that can cause the blood of man to run cold within him. And yet he stepped right into the abode of fear in the slim chances of saving my life. Now I owe it to him, and indeed to myself. No, to all of our people, to journey with him on his quest. Surely you see that his intention is only to seek the benefit of the people of Telmerion.
You speak true, my son,
Roderick replies.
I suppose a part of me, however, wishes to keep you here with me for as long as I remain in this life.
And I do wish that, father,
Says Rorlain.
but this I wish for more. Or rather, I feel compelled to do this, and would not be in the right to say no to the force that is driving me.
Should you not take some time to consider this more thoroughly, to think more of this before making such a radical decision?
Eldarien asks.
My mind is made up, but if you insist that I wait and consider, I will do as you ask.
I am not going to ask you to do anything. Your decision is your own, even though the path shall belong to both of us, were you truly to come with me. It is an interweaving of destinies, as you yourself spoke of yesterday, and now I know just how serious you were.
I am as serious about this as I have ever been about anything,
Says Rorlain.
I am sorrowful to leave my father and hope that I may return to be with him again. But I understand that the path ahead of us is dangerous, even if I know little to nothing of the nature or the depth of such danger.
So you know that it may be unlikely that your wish to return is fulfilled.
Eldarien queries.
Indeed.
And you wish to go nonetheless?
Just as truly.
Very well.
Says Eldarien at last, softly, and Roderick nods to this too, understanding the heart of his son very well. Indeed, if he was younger, he probably would have offered to accompany them as well, or to have gone in his son's place.
But one more thing.
Eldarien continues.
I will not be departing today, and probably not tomorrow either, as long as your hospitality will have me, and I want you to remain open to changing your mind until the moment we leave.
My mind is sure, but I understand. I will try to avoid rashness, and will take this time to reflect upon my motivations and to steel my will.
Good, because a weak resolve will falter when the path grows dark.
Eldarien says gently.
But a decision made in freedom and wisdom will sustain the heart even in difficulty.
But not infallibly.
Roderick adds.
The strength of man alone is not enough.
That is true.
Eldarien agrees.
We must look to ourselves as best we can, but more importantly, we must look beyond ourselves. Do both while you are here, and I will feel comfortable having you at my side, even if we must walk into darkness and danger.
On the 5th day after Rorlain's rescue, the two men set out from the homestead. Eldarien is not in a hurry to leave, since he knows the pain it causes Roderick to let his son go, and also the pain that Rorlain must feel, even though he hides it well. He feels a great responsibility for the events that his actions have set into motion and fears for Rorlain's well-being, but also, in his heart of hearts, he knows the rightness of the latter's choice. He takes solace in knowing that Rorlain has survived in the wilderness for many years, a hunter, gatherer, and laborer, and therefore will be able to stand strong both in his strength of will as well as in the many skills he has gained. For both will be necessary in the path ahead of them. Eldarien doesn't know what awaits them. Indeed, he knows so little that he feels as if they walk into an abyss of darkness with no light and no destination. Unconsciously, he finds himself grasping for some security, some stronghold in the swirling waters of time that roil about his feet, and he reaches out with the impulse of his heart toward Ierendal, to whom he had cried in the churning waves of the ocean, harbinger of death, and also to Hiliana, whose voice had come so unexpectedly in the shadows of obscurity, swelling forth from the unearthly creature whom his blade had dispelled. They leave a little before mid-morning, and Roderick sees them off with tears in his eyes, clinging to his lashes but refusing to fall down his cheeks. He says, before they turn to go,
"Come back to me, my son, if you can. But I understand that you walk as you must. You have my blessing to go as you see fit. My heart shall go with you always.
And my heart shall remain with you, Tar,
whispers Rorlain.
Fear not for us, and doubt not my love.
And that is all. They take to the path that Eldarien had been following when he first came upon the house in the clearing, and begin to follow it to the west. The day is warmer than it has been since Eldarien arrived in Igni, and he allows himself to hope for the full casting off of the lingering cloak of winter's cold. Rorlain follows behind him, and he realizes that he must adjust again to not traveling alone. Indeed, he realizes that traveling with one other person is much more tangible to him than traveling with a whole company, since in a company he could still discover a kind of solitude. But here, the presence of the other is keenly felt, not as outside of his solitude so much as part of it. It is not that Rorlain speaks much, rather he speaks almost not at all. It is simply his presence, and a presence that has been particularly tied up in life and death, in indebtedness and fidelity to Eldarien's own life, that he feels so viscerally. And after the first period of adjustment, Eldarien welcomes this presence. Indeed, he begins to find in it consolation and strength.
May he find some little consolation from my presence as well.
Eldarien finds himself wishing as he steps over the trunk of a tree that has fallen across the path. He turns back and watches Rorlain step over it too, clothed in sturdy cloth and leather travelling gear, with his pack about his shoulders, a bow and a quiver full of arrows along with it, and a sharp crescent-bladed axe in his belt.
We will follow this path.
Eldarien begins,
as far as it leads us, and then we'll make our way up through the highlands to the foothills of the mountains. I don't suspect the path will take us very close to our destination, but a path also won't be as necessary once we are out of the trees. I have never been up to the mountains from this direction, so I don't know the area. But once we get close enough, I should have no trouble navigating the landscape, as I lived there and explored quite widely for the entirety of my youth.
Rorlain nods, and when he comes to Eldarien, the two begin to walk side by side. He says in response,
So this Serra Galaptes, you said that it is our first destination. Tell me about it.
I mentioned that it may hold clues about these creatures that people call the Druidach. The reason I say this is because it is a barrow, an ancient barrow dedicated to the first king, by the same name. But not only is he buried there, rather he is entombed along with many of his successors, and also many of his clansmen, and the clansmen who came after him for generations. I have not explored the vast tunnels of the place, if vast they are, as the legends tell. You see, no one has been in the barrow for centuries, at least according to our knowledge.
Why do you suspect this barrow will be of assistance to us, and not any other?
Rorlain asks.
Because I have been in it.
You just said no one has been in it for centuries,
exclaims Rorlain with a laugh in his voice.
Yes, sorry about that.
Eldarien chuckles.
I meant no one except for myself. For you see, there are two entrances. The main one is a large cavern in the side of a cliff, a gaping entrance in a wall of stone among the feet of the mountain. The first chamber is open, unbarred, without even a door. I used to explore there as a child, and many others did as well. But there is little to see there. It is mainly just a cave. But at the back of this cave is a massive, ancient doorway, arched and engraved with runes. No one knows how to open it, to cause the heavy stone doors to swing open, save destroying them by force. There is another entrance, however, which perhaps only I have ever taken, and that unintentionally. It is a great sinkhole in the earth, not far from the entrance to the cavern. It opens straight into an underground lake into which the rains fall and the snows melt, and which connects with the rest of the barrow, or at least with parts of it. Like I said, I know very little, since I did not explore it in any depth. My main concern was to get out.
How did you unintentionally find this entrance?
Rorlain asks.
Well,
Eldarien begins, and then pauses, not knowing how much to share. He's already coming to trust Rorlain, but these memories are too deep, too painful to share lightly and on such short acquaintance. But then again, he realizes he has already opened up a great deal to the Feskar family. Did he do this only because he knew he would probably never see them again? Or was there another reason?
Eldarien.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. It happened when my village was destroyed. I suppose you need to know since we may pass that way. In fact,
He pauses and then, to his own surprise, adds,
I intend to stop there. It has been a long time, and I want to take the opportunity.
Your village?
It went by the name of Falstead. Perhaps you've heard of it, perhaps not.
No, I do not recall ever hearing of it.
I expected as much. It was never rebuilt.
Eldarien, I'm so sorry.
It was a long, long time ago.
Some things even time cannot mend.
Yes, but much of the sting is gone.
Eldarien says softly,
And there are things besides time which can also mend the heart. And the answer to the question you have not asked is, my family died along with the rest of the village. To my knowledge, I am the only survivor.
Rolain says nothing in response to this, but his silence is adequate response. After a while, Eldarien continues,
Falstead was attacked by Relihim. They were bolder in those days and frequently passed through the areas to the east of the Teldren Mountains. We lived in fear of them, and in this case, our fears were realized. It was fleeing from the village in the dark of night that I fell into the sinkhole. It may well have saved my life.
Again, the conversation lulls into silence, and they continue walking side by side, the quiet sounds of the forest enveloping them and their footsteps against dirt and stone crunching as they walk. It is only a few minutes until the land begins to rise more rapidly and the trees begin to lessen. In the place of the trees, great stones litter the landscape, at first few in number and then greater. After about half an hour, they crest the steepest rise and find themselves once again facing the highlands, at the place where the steppe meets the forest. They are further south this time, far enough that they see nothing that stirs any remembrance. It must be 5 or 10 miles to the north where the river flows out of the highlands and into the woods, near which the ravine cuts into the earth. The ravine which once housed a creature of immeasurable darkness, and now lies empty. At last, Rolain speaks again and breaks the silence.
I have 2 questions, and you may answer them in whatever way you please.
Go ahead. Forgive my silence.
There is nothing to forgive. My first question, I still don't understand how the barrow will help us in our journey. Second, how shall we get in?
Good questions.
Eldarien says with a smile,
I suppose my words haven't been very helpful in that regard. As for the second question, I don't really know yet. We will see when we get there. If all else fails, I suppose we can tie a rope and rappel down into the sinkhole.
Rolain smiles at this and casts a friendly glance at Eldarien.
As for the first question,
Eldarien continues,
the barrow is the only lead I have that stirs any connection in my mind with what I have heard of the nature of the Druidach. It is said they are human in appearance, and yet like walking corpses, the living dead. Does this not make you think of a barrow?
That is where the dead are.
Rolain says.
And if the dead came to life, it would be from there. But there are graveyards all over the land.
Yes. But there was something else I encountered in the barrow which draws another connection.
What was that?
The lights.
The lights.
Before the dead, who were remarkably well preserved, burned lights that seemed never to go out, but rather to burn continually.
The vigil candles of the dead?
Rolain asks.
Just like the tales.
Eldarien affirms, with a slow nod of his head.
It is amazing to hear that it is true. I mean, literally true. I always thought the candles were symbolical, signs of the vigilant waiting of those who had passed, but it seems it is both.
Indeed.
Eldarien says, and with this the conversation lapses back into silence. After a while, Rolain falls a few yards behind Eldarien again, and the 2 men are caught up in their own thoughts, while their steps carry them across the highlands to the mountains that loom large, snow-capped and imposing, but beautiful in the distance.